Welcome, everyone. I am Charlie Thomas, Executive Director of ACTC, the Association of Core Texts and Courses. And this is the live question period for Seemee Ali's core conversation on Homer. So glad you found us. I'm still bringing in people from the waiting room, so our crowd might grow a little. And of course, if you need to leave, that's fine. This is being recorded, just so you're aware of that. A couple of quick announcements, and then I'm going to hand it right over to Seemee. First, there is one more, or two more really, core conversations this academic year. Krishnan Venkatesh is doing a core conversation on Sima. In fact, I just got off Zoom with Krishnan. We recorded his remarks just now, and I'll be posting them later today. Sima is a remarkable ancient Chinese historian, and I think you'll all find it extraordinarily interesting. So that's happening. The live question period for Krishnan will be February 11th. And then we have one more after that. Mary Townsend of St. John's University will be making some remarks on Simone de Beauvoir, and those will be posted soon as well. And then we'll have the live conversation with her on March 11th, always noon Eastern time this year. So, but since you found us now, I'm confident you'll be able to find us then. Besides core conversations, ACTC has a few other things going on as well, including, as long as the pandemic allows, and I am at this point very hopeful that it will, we will be meeting face-to-face in the same room, around the same tables, April 21st through 24th at the University of Notre Dame. Paper and panel proposals are welcome. Those forms are available on our website. And registration is also open. Only a couple more weeks until the proposal deadline, but you have until early April actually to register for the conference. So I hope you will go look at the website for details. Our theme is Power and the Canon, which should generate some very interesting conversation. And we'd love to see you all there. That would be, I'm thinking of this as a kind of a grand reunion. And so the more, as usual, but in particularly this year, the more the merrier. But now I should into the preliminaries and get us started. We are going for 45 minutes today, rather than an hour, just so you guys can pace yourselves and get in on the get in on the conversation before time runs out. And I'll turn it over to Seemee in just a second. But when she invites questions, the easiest way for your question or comment to make it into the conversation is for you to raise your hand virtually, and Zoom makes that possible by putting a little symbol. You see, I just raised my hand in your box. Hopefully you can see that. The way you do that for yourself is to, at the bottom of the screen, find the button that says reactions. And then at least in my edition of Zoom, which I think most of you also have, at the bottom choice of that reactions window that opens up is sort of a long button that says raise hand, or if you want to take it down, which I hope you won't, but I will, you can hit lower hand. And I will recognize people more or less in the order that they raise their hands, only exception being if someone has not yet got into the conversation. I might move them up a queue a bit if that turns out to be relevant, but otherwise we'll just go that way. But now it is very much my pleasure to introduce and hand this conversation over to Seemee Ali, president of the Dallas Institute, who gave some wonderful and provocative remarks on Homer, which I hope you had a chance to watch. Seemee, thank you for doing this and welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here, and joining a conversation about my favorite subject. Uh, so I offered a few remarks, and if you have had a chance to listen to them, wonderful. Um, I could sum them up very quickly by saying that I should have disambiguated between epic, E-P-I-C, and epoch, E-P-O-C-H. Epic with an I seems to have very much everything to do with epoch with an O. So maybe I'll just leave it at that. And if you have questions, please jump in. Otherwise, we can just start reading the Iliad aloud.
Manon, Aida, Thea. Who would like to start? Paige, please. Oh, yes. Unmute yourself, please, Paige.
There we go. I didn't expect to be first. Hello to everyone. Hello, friends. And Seemee, I enjoyed your talk very, very much. I'm not a classics person, and I don't know ancient Greek. But with those two caveats, let me ask my questions and blunder right ahead. I was very interested in what you were saying about Odysseus's eidolon and the doubleness and just all kinds of cool things in your talk. But I thought I'd ask you to talk a little bit about the word eidolon and its plural eidola, if that's correct, and not to take you away from your topic into etymology, but I know you think about these things from having heard your talk. Would you like to maybe talk a little bit about the way eidolon and eidola have come into English? Because somehow I think that relates to some of the things you were bringing up and the ways that Homer continues to be so important to us in contemporary life. Could you do a little etymology just for me and everybody else?
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful question, and how nice to meet you. I'm very happy that my remarks were accessible. I am not a classicist either, just for the record. I just fell in love with Homer and decided I would try to learn Greek and try to understand the epics better. So in terms of eidolon, the singular, and eidola, plural, and their sort of the way we sort of entertain those words in English, it's kind of obvious, right? So our idea of idol and idolatry are directly related to that that Greek word that means image. As I was thinking about these terms, I've been thinking about the different ways in which we think about images in the 21st century and through the tradition. There are debates that other people in this audience can address better than I in terms of the meaning of the word idol. There's also the sense of icon and an image that leads us into a reality greater than the one we inhabit here. But eidola in Homer were interesting to me, and the rarity of that use was interesting to me in the Iliad and the Odyssey, because so often the word seems to be a kind of test. And so when in the very first instance of the use of the word, Aeneas is wounded on the battlefield. Apollo sort of picks him up, takes him to his ICU unit, at his temple in Pergamon, and replaces him with a ghostly image, an eidolon. And then when Aeneas comes back, in, IRL, we might say, in real life, the narrator tells us that no one around questioned his return. And that is really strange that nobody questions him. Is there no difference between the hologram Aeneas and the real Aeneas? I think this is a great question for people who read the Aeneid and think about what's going on with Aeneas, who, when he comes back out of, he goes down into the underworld and he comes out of the false gate of dreams. So all of that thinking about the eidolon and the tradition is not necessarily related to your question about etymology, but something is up there. And it does seem to me that images in general are problematic for philosophers, and they're problematic for real people. And we are being tested by them constantly. I would just add the Wall Street Journal's recent discussions of Facebook and the images of women, young women, are relevant, I think, to this conversation as well. So others can probably speak more about the sort of the etymology of eidolon in English, but I think, is that the direction you were?
Sure, very much so. Yes, and as you were speaking, I thought about the word persona and masking and what is false, what is true, but sometimes the false face can lead to a more important truth, perhaps as in your example from the Aeneid there. So thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Josh.
Seemee, delightful remarks. Thank you very much for your lovely talk about Homer, not just the Iliad, but also the Odyssey. So I have the kind of question that a philosophy professor tends to have. You mentioned that there was a little bit of an ambiguity. It was about whether Achilles is the end or the beginning. That is to say, you actually used both about him. So I do understand that he's a new hero vis-a-vis Heracles. And yet there does seem to be this insinuation that Odysseus might somehow be the more enduring model. So I was wondering whether there was the possibility that that Achilles partakes of Menes, which is supposed to be the purview of the gods, is some sort of an indication that he's the end. He's not a new hero. He's a hero sort of attached or stuck with the gods. And Odysseus is new. Part of the reason for putting it that way and raising the question is that Socrates then in turn, in the Apology, portrays himself as the new Achilles. So just your thoughts about the new, the old, the end, the beginning.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for your kind words. I'm so glad you're here. And thank you for that terrific question. So let's stick with Achilles first, and then maybe Odysseus. The image, to use that word again, of Achilles that seems relevant here is the moment that he receives as a gift a shield from the god Hephaestus. And we watch him looking at the shield, and we also see at the beginning of book 19 something remarkable. That is, he can look at the images on that shield, which are not, as far as I can tell, called idola, but he can look at that work of art, he can look at the shield, and his fellow warriors cannot look directly at it. So the shield is crafted by Hephaestus, and the cosmos that it imagines has no recognizable, glamorous figures on it. The only two gods on it are Athena and Ares. And so if you think about that shield, Hephaestus says to Thetis, this is around book 18, line 465, if you're looking for chapter and verse. He says, I wish I could hide him away from death. And he's talking about Achilles, to Achilles' mother Thetis. I wish I could hide him away from death and its sorrow at that time when his hard fate comes upon him, as surely as there will be fine armor for him, such as another man out of many men shall wonder at when he looks at on it. So this is Hephaestus saying, don't worry, I can give you the shield and it's going to be fabulous. People will wonder at it, even after Achilles' death. But what I really wish I could do is to protect your son from death. This is as he's crafting the shield. This is kind of a long answer to your question, but I hope it's helpful, about ends and beginnings. So I think his mother, Achilles' mother Thetis, knows that Achilles is going to die in this armor. And when Achilles is looking at the shield, we might say he's looking at the new cosmos, the cosmos that Odysseus will inhabit. A cosmos of people who don't seem to have recognizable names or instantly recognizable icons like Heracles and the bear skin, that kind of, or the lion skin. I don't know why I said skin, but you know what I mean. So the thing about that shield is precisely the problem that Hephaestus names. That is, it's not going to shield Achilles from death. It will be somehow the instrument of his death in some way. And so we see Achilles as mortal, not as God, looking at the shield, which offers, I think, a glimpse of the new world later, the new cosmos. And he stands, we the audience of the epic, see Achilles both as other than, separate from the cosmos on that shield, standing in front of it, and also the figure who somehow is the cause of that shield's coming into being. So my proposal would be, maybe this is a weasel answer, but he's both. He is the hinge between one and the other. And you might say he's the most shining example of what a hero is, just as the moment that the heroic age is ending. And yet, everything that is shining about him makes possible what is to come. Thank you for the question.
So Josh, you're happy to let that stand. Okay, great. Michael.
Hello, and thank you, Seemee. Always great to learn about Homer from you. I'm going to try to squeeze two questions in together. I think they're connected based on two things that you said. I mean, one, reminding us that Manus belongs to the gods and is nonetheless attributed to Achilles at the beginning, and this is a kind of sign that the cosmic order is in upheaval. And then secondly, what you just repeated, right, that Achilles is kind of the hinge, the beginning of the end of the heroic age. So one question is whether, at the beginning in book one, in the quarrel with Agamemnon, isn't he still, doesn't he still understand himself as just insisting on the rightness of the old model, right? That it's Agamemnon who's violating the old model. On the other hand, in terms of the upheaval of the order, of the separation between gods and mortals, I wonder what you can tell me about his claim that Zeus owes him honor. Makes in talking to Thetis and sending Thetis to talk to Zeus. That seems to be quite a presumptuous claim. It seems to transgress the boundary between gods and mortals. So those are my two.
Thank you, Michael. It's so great to see you. And thank you for, as ever, for wonderful questions. Maybe I'll take the second question first, and that is, what about that presumptuous claim? Everything that I understand about the Iliad is informed by a book by Laura Slatkin called The Power of Thetis. And I was introduced to that book by another really great thinker on Homer, and that is Glenn Arbery, who's part of this conversational group as well. So Laura Slatkin connects the story that is told in the Iliad to a prophecy that we learn about in Pindar. And in that prophecy, Zeus and Poseidon are contending for the love of Thetis, and they're both smitten with her. They're both sort of, there's some kind of cosmic rivalry going on. You know, who will win Thetis, and they abruptly stop the courtship when they understand that any divine son of the goddess Thetis will unseat the Olympian order. So, and we can track, Laura Slatkin does track all the different places where the Iliad seems to allude to this understanding that the epic audience might know. And maybe the most powerful moment of allusion is when just around the making of the shield, when Thetis goes to visit Hephaestus, and she speaks about her own dishonor, and she tells us that she was forced into the bed of a mortal by the Olympians. This is why she's embarrassed to go to Olympus, as she says later. But that marriage to Peleus, Achilles' father, is a forced marriage. She calls it that in book 18, not to say a rape, right? But that is a kind of background story. And when Achilles calls upon his mother to ask for her help in this dispute with Agamemnon, he tells her, he tells her that you've told me many times about your relationship with Zeus. You've told me that you saved his kingship, right? And there's that story, which is explicitly told again in the Iliad. So whatever honor Achilles feels that is his due from Zeus may be his mother's due, you know, on one level. And there may be a confusion in Achilles' mind between the honor that is due to his mother and the honor that is due to him. And there may be a natural confusion, not one that speaks well of Achilles, but there may be this sense that we all have, that we're not supposed to die and we are supposed to live forever, and the gods owe us this. You know, and that sort of fundamental sort of human problem seems to be conflated with this other mythical tradition. So I think that's part of the presumption of the honor that Achilles feels is due to him. So it feels like it's the problem of on the one hand being human, and on the other hand of being incredibly ambitious, conflating oneself with the divine in that way. Your first question
was whether Achilles' quarrel with Agamemnon isn't, in his understanding, initially insisting on the old order, right?
Yes.
That Agamemnon is the one violating the old order, so that Achilles starts off understanding himself or presenting himself as insisting on or demanding that the terms of the old order be lived up to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that goes back to, thank you for the repetition. I was got carried away maybe with the second part of the question. That old order that Agamemnon violates may not be so old. That is to say, maybe that is the thing to be renewed. So the code of hospitality, which we see the suitors violating in the Odyssey, and the code of sort of civil relationships between human beings, greeting the other, the code of Xenia, we see that flouted in the figures of the suitors in the Odyssey. And we see that when Odysseus goes home, he has to reestablish that very kind of civil order, you might say, on which any society depends. So it's flouted by Agamemnon. It may need to be renewed, and it may need to take new form, that basic sense of
Thinking not so much of that aspect of the order as of the simple claim that honor and glory are due to the most excellent. Right? Most honor and the most glory are due to the most excellent. And that's what Agamemnon has been violating and is now violating in the most extreme way.
yeah. Who is the best of the Achaeans? That gets turned upside down, just to go back to Josh's question. That feels like it gets reimagined in, on the shield of Hephaestus, but also at the end of the Odyssey, all the children of great men who have been pursuing Penelope are ingloriously, sort of dispatched to Hades, gibbering like bats. And the people who will take up the rule of the new kingdom in Ithaca are former swineherd, who will be elevated into a new position. So the recognition of who is best, I think, is going to change as this new cosmos, as we're arguing, as Michael and I are arguing in our book, takes form. Is that more useful in terms
Well,
of—
I just meant to say that Achilles does not understand himself at the start as a critic of the old order, right?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't.
Cornered into that, so to speak.
Yeah.
Corners himself.
Exactly. So it's his mother, by the way, who tells him, okay, I hear you. And now why don't you do this? Why don't you sit with some Manus for a while? Why don't you conjure that? And it is she who elicits it from him. So that's like 422 of book one, maybe. But so she conjures this Manus from him. And I think we see it taking its shape in book 9, when Achilles realizes he has a choice between a short and glorious life, or thought that he had a choice between a short and glorious life. That's what his mother told him, and a long and uneventful life. And we see that kind of rambling speech in book 9, which seems to go in many different directions. I think that's the moment that we see him taking in what this really means.
This really isn't at all helpful for your incredibly great answer and thoughtful response to Michael's questions, but I have to stand up for Eumaeus because I love him too much not to. But he was a prince before he was a swineherd, so one could see him as being elevated naturally, or out of the order of things, or you could see it as a restoration of order for him to have something greater ahead of him. We have one more person on the queue for now. Hopefully we'll have some others in there, or if not, you'll have to suffer through a question from me. I'm afraid we haven't met, but the person whose name is listed as MDL, please, you're next, but introduce yourself to us, please, before you ask your question.
May I introduce her? Mary D. Lucia is a PhD in comparative literature from Harvard University, and a long, long standing friend of mine and a brilliant poet. And I'm so glad he's here.
Yes, and I'm a special education teacher now at Cascades High School, which is a transfer high school on the Lower East Side for students who haven't been able to graduate a lot of because of systemic racism and poverty and because they've had other priorities. And so I help them graduate. And a lot of what they do right now is like there are these online courses called iLearns, and everything is on the screen and they just have to like answer multiple choice questions. And a lot of times what they do is they look on other websites for the answers, whether that's literature or chemistry. So my question, Seemee, based on that very moving talk that you gave about teaching at the beginning and the way our students are asking questions and linking that to the fact that we can expand our world as we need to right now through our imaginations and through narrative, through epic. You know, the stories we tell can make us greater. And I wrote to you a little about this. So what are our epics now? Like I think like my students don't even have a fuzzy notion of what I used to do or of this kind of conversation. They look at screens in class. There's always a phone open, um, and that's where their desires are. They want to be an influencer. They want, you know, it's like, Miss, look at my picture, you know, and it's like, Patrice, this looks nothing like you. Like, you know, they're able to transform their bodies so profoundly with makeup, with you know, substances. So what you it's a hard question. Give me the answer. What is the answer? What will save us? How do I teach these people?
Oh,
Because there's an entire culture out there that has no, just like on that shield, they don't even know how to recognize these things. I think I told you I had a student named Dante, and I said, "Oh yes, you're named after Dante," and he said, "Yeah, the video game Dante." what do we offer them? How do we what do we offer ourselves in this culture?
oh, so I love this question. I think it's the most important question to be asking. And in this new position I hold as exile, I, and as you are from this very beautiful old order that we used to call the liberal arts college, and which is sort of fading around us. I would say, um, I guess I'll tell you about a conversation I had yesterday. I was invited to meet with a group of, a very small group of people who talk about ideas at the Dallas Country Club, a place I never had imagined entering in my life. And I part of my discussion with them, I asked that group if they had children or grandchildren, and of course they all do. And I asked what they want for their children or their grandchildren going forward at a time when so many seeming givens are being questioned. Will liberal democracy make it? Will the air be breathable? Just all kinds of things that people are asking regardless of their politics. And I proposed that it used to be that we would prepare people for adulthood in college with these texts that give us courage and open our imagination. But people, let me just use a code word, civilians, don't know this. they don't know that people won't encounter Shakespeare or Homer or Plato. So part of our work, it seems to me, as academics, is to get out of the ivory tower and talk to people who want this education for their children. So that's one very just like call to arms. And then another thing I would say is that human beings are amazing, and artists are the most amazing of all human beings. And the epic is out there. It's there in new forms. Watch The Wire, watch The Sopranos. Those are epics. And they know it. They know it. There's a scene in The Sopranos when Tony Soprano goes to Kumai and he meets the Sibyl. And so the language of the epic may not be Greek or Latin or Miltonic, but it's out there. And I think that the work that you're doing, Mary, is going to be informed by your own encounter with this work. It's going to be like Chiron teaching Achilles in the wilderness. Like you're the person who is picking up the pieces and the shards and quietly just secretly subverting, the culture around you.
I think that sense of the fragment is what we have to work with. It's true, and I think the work you're doing in encouraging those conversations is do you like the Teacher Institute? I think is important. I used to think I would have this job and I would help students get scholarships to college, and I would get them to read Homer. But I see that the work is like that wilderness it's almost like unfathomable if you haven't been in a school like mine. So I encourage everyone to do that.
Well, it's so important what you're doing. It's so important that someone here, just even the oral tradition that there is an Achilles, or there is a Heracles, or there is an Athena, just to hear those names and feel at home with them, even if they don't encounter the whole epic, matters.
We have sadly a little less than 10 minutes left, and two people on the queue. So Denise Dutton.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all, Seemee, for the remarks on YouTube and this conversation. I listened to your remarks last night, and this conversation has helped me think about the idea of doubleness and the power of teaching. So Mary, your conversation just reminded me of the last time I taught the Iliad. This very talented and ambitious young woman read the Iliad and really did not like Achilles at all. And when she submitted her final, she was reflecting on sort of what about the power of these ancient texts we were reading she'd take away with her. And she zeroed in on Simone Weil's essay, The Iliad, a Poem of Force, and the phrase, a moment of grace. And then read through and said there were these moments of grace when she went back to the first book of the Iliad and re-encountered Achilles, not as the spoiled brat that she had thought of him the first time, but as the human threading that needle between, threading the needle to use his power to defend others, right? To stand for what was right up against the bully. And that this was a moment of grace because she saw the text in a new way. And she goes on and talks about how she reimagined Antigone later too. But I say this to raise my question, which is, Hector is surprisingly absent from our conversation, especially given most of the students I read the Iliad with gravitate towards him. And so I just wonder what your thoughts are about do you read Hector as a double image to Achilles? Or what came to mind as I was listening to your talk last night was that moment when Hector's son doesn't recognize him, and how that sits alongside Achilles recognizing himself when Hector's wearing his armor. I'm just wondering your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think you've helped me come back to a question that Michael Dink was asking earlier. So Hector, and this, I guess, also relates to all of the other questions. He is the end. You know, he is the last one. And I think when he puts on Achilles' old armor, that's the moment when the poet says, this is it. The new armor Achilles will wear, Hector is going to die in that old armor as an image of Achilles, as an image of that entire line, and as a kind of, I guess, finale, right? And so the poem ends with the funeral of Hector, tamer of horses. That's somehow sums up the whole thing here at the ending. But he's so beautiful, Hector. He's so good. He's so impatient with his ridiculous brother Paris. And he is singly saving his city, and he knows it's doomed. And so that moment when Athena comes out and presents herself as his brother feels so, so, so painful. And I thought it was interesting, back to this little bee I have in my bonnet about this word idola. I would have expected that moment with Deiphobus to be, I'm being summoned by my day job. So I'll have to be very brief here, but that moment when Athena comes to him as a trick figure of the brother, that is not, that moment is, she's not called an idol. You know, Deiphobus is not an eidolon. It's not an opening into something bigger. It's just a dirty trick. And that's quite fascinating to me, that there are different kinds of doubles and they have different kinds of lessons for us. Some are openings into something like wisdom. Some are hard, hard delusions. Charlie, I wish we could keep talking.
I was going to jump in to thank you with apologies to Michael, but I know you two are friends and can continue this conversation by some other means. But I hope you all will join me in thanking Seemee for her remarks and for this conversation. And I hope you will all join us in April at Notre Dame, details on the website, and come back for Krishnan Venkatesh and Mary Townsend's core conversations in the next month or two. But for right now, thank you so much, Seemee. This was really great, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This is the highlight of many, many months. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody. See you soon, I hope.